Hello everybody, I'm Chris. I'd like to welcome you all back to my series called Blueprint for Composition. In this particular installment, we're going to be working on a practice exercise on how to distinguish between different types of sentences and how to distinguish between the compound sentence, the simple sentence, and the complex sentence, as well as how to identify phrases and or fragments. So what I have up here is an exercise for us to do that. So let's get started. The directions for this exercise, as we have done in previous exercises, we're just adding more information here. Label each expression as PHR for phrase, S for simple sentence, CS for compound sentence, CX for complex sentence, and F for fragment. So in the last section of this series, in the last segment, we discussed the next type of sentence known as the complex sentence. So again, just for a quick review, a complex sentence is composed of two essential parts. One is called a subordinate clause. It must have a subordinate clause, at least one. And it must have at least one independent clause. So with the example we looked at in the previous installment, I mentioned that the subordinate clause must be attached to the independent clause. And these two clauses, when they are combined together, show a relationship of ideas and a combination of ideas. So we have to think about the complex sentence as being a two-part sentence. One subordinate clause and one independent clause. So we described some of the connectors that could be used to start or to be part of the subordinate clause. I like to refer to them as subordinate clause connectors. Their technical name are subordinating conjunctions because they do act like conjunctions to show relationships of ideas. And I wanted to illustrate with the example in the previous installment that it's very important to remember. If you separate out a dependent or subordinate clause as a separate sentence, this is a mistake. This creates what is known as a fragment or a sentence fragment. And we've talked about these types of sentence fragments before. And it's something that show up from time to time on different standardized tests in the grammar sections of those tests, like the SAT, or we mentioned the communication and literacy test. So we want to be careful, again, to clarify, we're talking about here formal academic English composition, sentence structure, sentence organization, sentence variety. So let's get started with this exercise. So let's look at number one. And again, I've left out all punctuation marks except for commas here and there to indicate a little bit easier what type of sentence it is. Or not sentence. So look at number one. It says once upon a time. So as we know, this is a common expression used to start such things as fairy tales. Now, what is it? Phrase, simple sentence, compound sentence, complex sentence, or fragment? Once upon a time. So if you are of the impression that number one is a phrase, I will say, I agree. It is a phrase. And you could make the argument, well, if you put a period here, wouldn't that be a fragment? Yes, it would. So again, the fragment is what? It's an incomplete idea, which is set off as a separate sentence. So yes, if I put a period at the end of that, once upon a time, it would create a fragment. But the larger issue is, does it have the sentence parts required to be an independent clause? Does it have the sentence parts required to be a compound sentence? Does it have the sentence parts to be considered a complex sentence? So, an even bigger question is, does it have the essential parts to classify as a clause? And in this case, it does not. Because we can't have a simple sentence, compound sentence, or complex sentence without having clauses. So, I said in the previous example of this series that sentences are combinations of clauses and phrases. So, as you probably recall, the clause is the essential building block of the sentence. The phrase can be added on to a clause to give more information in more detail, but I cannot use a phrase as a separate sentence. I must have a subject and a verb and a complete idea to form a clause. Yes. So phrase is the point. Got it. Number 2. Maria plays the piano and the violin. Take a moment to think about that. Phrase, simple sentence, compound sentence, complex sentence, or fragment. Maria plays the piano and the violin. How would you classify this? So if I was looking at this, I would ask myself, again, does it have all the essential ingredients or the essential components to form a clause? That's my starting point. And in this case, yes, it does. So it's definitely not a phrase, and therefore definitely not a fragment. So then what is it? Simple sentence, compound, or complex sentence? In this case, if you were going to say simple sentence, you would be correct. It is a simple sentence, or S. Okay? How do I know it's a simple sentence? What are the components of a simple sentence? A simple sentence is made up of one independent clause. Does this expression classify as an independent clause? Yes, it does. Does it have all the essential ingredients? Yes, it does. Maria is my subject. Plays is my verb. What about this? Piano, violin. These are nouns. Yes. Combined together with the and. That's fine. These are objects. All right? These are verb objects. Objects of the verb play. So Maria plays what and what? All right? She plays 2 instruments. The piano and the violin. I only have one subject and I only have one verb. I do have a conjunction here, but that's not joining clauses, that's joining nouns. Piano and violin. So, does it have at least one subject? Yes. Does it have at least one verb? Yes. Does it express a complete idea? Yes. Therefore, one independent clause, simple sentence. Number 3. After the rain stopped, comma, we went to play golf. Think about that one for a moment. After the rain stopped, we went to play golf. So where's the start? There's 2 places that I could say safely we can start. One is with this comma right here. But the other is with this word right here, in the word after. After is an expression of time, or it's a time word, a time connector. So, after what? After the rain stopped. So, is this a clause or a phrase? This is what I have to understand if I'm going to label this sentence correctly. If this is a complete clause, and then this is a complete clause over there, I understand this comma is here for a reason. And this is, in fact, a complete clause. So I do have a subject there, rain. I have a verb here, stopped. And I have a conjunction here. So, after the rain stopped, this is an example of a subordinate clause. An example of what is called an adverb clause of time. In the previous video of this series, we looked at an adverb clause connector of cause and effect. This one happens to be an adverb clause of time. But does it have the ingredients to be a compound sentence? No. Does it have the ingredients to be a simple sentence? No. Therefore, if you said complex sentence, you would be correct. Okay? Why? Because 1, this is my subordinate clause right here. Number 2, we went to play golf is an independent clause. So, therefore, a subordinate clause plus an independent clause equals complex sentence. All right? That's the very definition of a complex sentence. Now, let's look at number 4. Number 4 says, because the cost was too high. Think about that one for a moment. Because the cost was too high. How can we identify what type of expression this is? So, in a previous episode, I asked students to consider where to begin in the identification process. And I said, always begin by identifying subjects and verbs. So let's start with that. Do we have a subject and verb? In this case, we do. The word cost and the word was. Here's our subject, here's our verb. So that's step one. We have to consider, does it have a subject and a verb? In this case, yes. Now, you might think, oh, it has a subject and verb, therefore it must be at least a simple sentence or an independent clause. In this case, no, we have one other problem, and that's the word because right there. All right? As I mentioned in the previous installment of this series, because is a subordinate clause connector. We have to be very careful when we're using subordinate clause connectors to understand that it's going to be joined to an independent clause to form a complex sentence. Here we do not have a complete idea. And I mentioned in the previous episode that if I put a period right here, is this a complete thought? And the answer is no, it's not a complete thought. It has to be attached to an independent clause. This is incomplete. Because the cost was too high, what? We have the cause, we don't have the effect. So how are we going to do that? Say it's a separate sentence? No chance. So, because the cost was too high, if you said fragment, or F for fragment, that would be the correct response. All right? I'm not going to say this is a phrase because, again, a phrase does not have a subject and verb. So, once upon a time is a phrase because it has no subject and or verb. In this case, we have a subject and verb, so it's not a phrase. It is not a complete idea, is the problem. All right, now 5. Hector studied hard, comma, so he did well on the test. Think about that for a moment. Hector studied hard, comma, so he did well on the test. Again, go back and think. Start with subjects and verbs. How many subjects do I have? How many verbs do I have? So, I have a subject here, Hector. I have a verb here, studied. So that gives me one set of subjects and verbs. And then I have another one over here. He, subject, did is my verb. So I have a sentence here that has subject, verb on one side, subject, verb on the other, and then in the middle I have a comma and a conjunction. And the conjunction is the word so. So therefore, I understand that this is a combination of related ideas. How are the ideas related? With the word so, indicating cause and effect. Whatever comes after the word so is going to be an effect. Hector studied hard, cause. Effect, he did well on the test. I'm expressing the cause and effect relationship with the word so. I have an independent clause on one side. I have another independent clause on the other side. So what type of sentence formation is it? What type of sentence combines two independent clauses together? Compound sentence. All right? So if you said compound sentence for number 5, you would be correct. All right, so let's look at number 6. There was a thunderstorm yesterday. What type of expression is that? Phrase, simple sentence, compound, complex sentence, or fragment. There was a thunderstorm yesterday. Think about that for a moment. Now, start again. Subjects and verbs. Well, I see the word was here, so I know that's a verb. But maybe you're thinking, where's the subject? Well, in this case, we do have a subject. All right? So, whenever a sentence begins with the word there or with the word here, for example, the sentence subject comes after the verb. So this is a little bit different in the sense that in statements, which we're looking at here, these are all types of statements, there is such a thing called inverted word order. So, under certain circumstances, when we make a statement, a subject will come after a verb. Okay? So, 9 times out of 10, like in the other examples here, the sentence subject comes first and then the verb follows the subject. But in certain specific instances, under certain circumstances, we have to think about subject-verb inversion. So that is the technical name, subject-verb inversion. What it means is that the subject follows the verb instead of coming before the verb, even though it's a statement. So therefore, I cannot think of the word there as my subject. My actual subject is right here, thunderstorm. So, remember that rule. When you start a sentence with there or start a sentence with here, then the subject follows the verb in statements. Okay? So, that's step 1. Is it a complete idea? There was a thunderstorm yesterday. Yes. How many clauses do we have? 1 or 2? In this case, we have 1 clause. There was a thunderstorm yesterday is all 1 clause and 1 thought, 1 complete idea. So I don't have any connectors like because or after. I don't have any conjunctions like so. I do have a subject and a verb, so it's not a phrase. So by process of elimination, it can't be a fragment because it has a subject and verb. So therefore, compound sentence, no. Complex sentence, no. Phrase, no. Fragment, no. What are we left with? Simple sentence. A 1 clause sentence, 1 independent clause. Can I put a period here? There was a thunderstorm yesterday? Yes, it's a complete idea. Hector studied hard, so he did well on the test. Can I put a sentence period there? Yes, complete idea. Because the cost was too high, can I put a sentence period there? No. That would create a fragment. Okay? So I want to get that idea across. After the rain stopped, we went to play golf. If I put a period there, is it correct? Yes. Maria plays the piano and violin. If I put a period there, is it complete? Yes. Once upon a time, period? No. Not complete. Okay? So this is how I would label these particular expressions. I would like to thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful and instructive and useful for clarifying some confusion about how to identify the different types of sentences. Simple sentence, compound sentence, complex sentences, how they differ from phrases, how they differ from fragments. In future episodes of this series, we're going to get into the different types of subordinate clauses, the adjective clause, the adverb clause, and the noun clause, and give some examples of how to combine these ideas together in different ways and how to identify them in sentences. So I would like to thank you for watching and hope to see you again very soon.